Hey there, my name is Rachael Kalaki, and welcome to the Magdala Podcast. We at Magdala know from experience that pornography, masturbation, and other sexual addictions are not just a guy problem. The need for women to be accompanied in the journey towards healing from addiction has gone sorely unmet, and that's why we're here. Magdala exists as a space where women can find hope, healing, and freedom alongside each other from sexual addiction. Our goal is to supply you with support, community, and accountability. Here on the podcast, you'll find everything from testimonies to practical advice to dialogue about how to heal and live fully as a Catholic woman. Wherever you are in your journey, know that you're not alone, and we welcome you to this table. Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Magdala Podcast, our second episode on prayer. I have Annie with me today. Annie is Annie is here. She just added another note to our Google Doc that we're operating off of right now, and just derailed me with joy. Annie is our administrative coordinator, as I said in the last episode, and she also teaches people how to pray. So that's why you're here. Sometimes.
You know what I was thinking of, actually? When I text or edit Google documents, I always add way too many punctuation points. I'm sure a lot of you have people like that in your life that just, like, when they text you, it's just like all the punctuation points and emojis. And someone told me the other day, my good friend who was leading, I'll say, a talk on prayer for this one sort of big camp we just had for middle schoolers, and she was relating how just as we can decipher like the voice of our friends based on their texting things, you know, like it's similar to like scripture, that God's voice is so unique in scripture in a way that's so separate from the way that everybody else talks to us. So in the same way, I can like look at a text, not know it's from my mom, but like look at it and be like, oh, for sure my mom sent that.
Yep.
Like in the same way, I can like read from scripture, you hear a verse taken out from scripture and you can go, wow, like that's the Lord's voice. So that's our intro into prayer.
I love it. I love that, because we're talking today about longing for intimacy in prayer, and just how to actually, be with the Lord as a friend and as beloved in prayer. Easier said than done. I think we use that language often without actually talking about what that can look like, what that can mean for women in prayer. Women continually inspire me with their posture in prayer, and I mean, as a woman, like I just always feel like there's just this endless well of opportunity, when we're praying, of just getting to dive deeper into being the beloved. But I think, I don't know, I've thought before about just studying women's spirituality for the rest of my life and just like making that a thing, because I love it. But I think the entire church looks to women to learn like how to be intimate in prayer. Like, men have so many gifts in spirituality, but that heart to heart, that beloved to beloved, or lover to beloved thing, that can be really difficult for a lot of men to overcome, that just the imagery of that, or just the emotional difficulty of that. But for women, that's just it's not instant for all of us at all, but it is much easier. And so I'm just continually inspired by how many women just truly experience the Lord as lover and beloved. But we want to talk more about that today. And Annie started us off, and I'm just fading. But Annie,
I'll just
go, take us away.
I think something beautiful about, the feminine heart is so receptive, TOB of like our body reflects what's going on in our soul. And so the feminine body is made to be receptive. And so similarly, our heart is made to be receptive too. And that in prayer, I see this, I didn't make it. The Lord revealed to me something beautiful in, so the community I'm a part of is a bunch of young adult missionaries, and we have a huge culture of worship. So multiple times a week, the community of us, close to like 100, will gather and worship together, just sing praises to the Lord. We're very charismatic, so we're incredibly expressive in our bodies. Why? Because we're just expressing what's going on in our hearts.
Right.
But when we're in spaces of worship, I see more often than not that the men are very I don't want to say aggressive in a violent sense, but all of their body motions are one of pursuit, one of pushing out, one of giving, in a more,
Mm,
I'll just say maybe passionate. Maybe
or
that's a good word,
wild.
passionate way.
Yeah.
Yeah, wild for sure. And don't get me wrong, if you ever see me in spaces of worship, like I flail around. Okay, we're just being transparent. For my non-charismatic friends, we love you. For my
Yes.
charismatic friends, I love you. There's a place for both and. Okay, but a lot of the women are naturally more prone. I'll say to receptive postures, right? To be like, I'm
Mm.
sitting back and my hands are open because I recognize. I'll say like Mary and Martha, Mary at the foot of
Oh, yeah.
Jesus, just receiving from him. I think that's second nature to the feminine heart to do that. And for all the women out there who are like, okay, that's great, but I don't feel natural to that. I will tell you, I had a huge healing moment with the Lord 2 years ago where I recognized I could not like receive affirmation from anyone. And I felt
Oh.
so broken because I was like, I thought women were supposed to be good at receiving. And I suck at this, that when people
Mm.
try to give me gifts, I have this wall up. And there was all sorts of healing processes the Lord led me through. But I just want to say that
Yeah.
to acknowledge that, like, if you hear about like women being receptive, or if you're hearing like this should be easy because I'm a woman, I just want to like acknowledge like we're
Yeah.
all just coming in different places, and like that is your nature, and you are receptive, and there's healing that the Lord still has for you there. You're not broken,
Mm.
and that we're figuring it out together. So I just want to acknowledge we're all coming in different places right now. And so
Yeah.
I feel like even as we enter into talking about longing, like I feel like even that could rub someone the wrong way of like, but what about all these other longings? And just like the acknowledgement, they're all good. And we're not like
Mm.
saying any of these things to be like you're doing everything wrong, but more
Yeah.
so just to say like the fact that you're longing so deeply, that means you're doing something right.
Yes. Yes. And or even longing for longing. Like a lot of people beat themselves up for their dryness, and like, why am I not longing more? A friend of mine, or an acquaintance of mine, has a song called Grand Canyon, where she talks about being a woman who doesn't experience a ton of emotion in prayer. And something she said that I just loved was, because I felt that many times, was she said, I would rather be a canyon in the desert than a little thimble waiting for the rain. And just
Mm,
how the Lord comes and fills. And so she would rather feel this vast expanse of emotionlessness and emptiness, because she knows that the Lord is going to come fill, even if that's just an eternity. Um,
mm.
but she would rather have that than be a little tiny thimble that can only receive a couple drops of rain, and not easily fulfilled. So yeah, I think if you're a woman who, yeah, doesn't experience that posture very easily. Also, just receptivity is hard. It's awkward and vulnerable, and can be super
Yeah.
uncomfortable. And um, yeah, I mean, I'm married, obviously, and I think about like how uncomfortable receptivity is sometimes with my spouse, and just in receiving his love, receiving his affirmation, uh, receiving his pursuit of me. And gosh, I'm so awkward. I'm married to this man and I'm so awkward with him sometimes. I love him. I know him so well. He is my best friend. And sometimes I
Yeah.
just don't know how to do it. And uh, that's a constant mirror of how I am with the Lord. So I think, yeah, receptivity can be hard and awkward, and it is very vulnerable inherently. So, whoa, that was a good burp. Did you hear that?
Yeah.
Maeve just burped. Oh, good job, honey. But yeah, so it's a good point to start with, our friends who don't feel that relationship with him yet. And I think in recovery too, like we're talking about intimacy, and I think a lot of women are approaching prayer, or just intimacy with the Lord in general, being like, how can I possibly be intimate with anyone right now? Like, intimacy is a concept that's damaged for me. It's frightening. I feel ashamed. I don't feel like pure intimacy, loving intimacy is possible for me spiritually or physically with anyone. So how would you speak to those women who are experiencing my 4-month-old is contributing to the podcast conversation. Yeah, how would you speak to those women who are experiencing like a fear or a discouragement about intimacy with the Lord in prayer?
I think Maeve makes a good point there. If you caught on, how cute. She, yeah, I just like whether or not you feel it, like part of our identity of who God says we are is that we're made for intimacy, and
Mm,
my heart breaks. I'll say for women who don't know that truth, and not even putting them as in like an us them, just of like my heart breaks for past Annie, who is just so wounded by like what
mm,
is supposed to look like, that of course like of declarations that I make over myself often, like I actually have a reminder on my phone that comes up every week that says my heart is made for intimacy. This is something that I continually allow the Lord to speak into my life,
mm.
because a huge place of woundedness for a while. And it all just came from like what intimacy is and what intimacy isn't, you know?
Yeah.
So I think when you're so enveloped in sexualized culture, sexual addiction, whatever that looks like, intimacy immediately is linked to sex. And
Mm-hmm.
so either not a part of the equation, or that was wounded in the part of the equation, or something. We all have sexual brokenness, something going on. When that
Yeah.
becomes a part of it, then because we've linked intimacy with that, then intimacy also becomes distorted. And so
Yeah.
when we take that back to recognize what intimacy is, and just a longing of closeness, of connection, and recognizing that connection can happen in so many ways that aren't sexual at all.
Yes.
Like, you are holding your beautiful small child right now. This is an intimate moment of the two of you, and it has no sexual connotations at all, no
No.
romantic even, just deep love of longing and connection. And so I think when we take away this like sexual romantic tie to intimacy, and we just make it
Yeah.
is just connection, there's huge freedom that can come from that, because it's not as small or as in a box as we put it into, but just,
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the biggest lies of the pornographic world, the industry and just the ways that it leaks into our everyday content is it just really sells the lie to women that like the longing for emotional connection that you have that is inherent to women and inherent to human beings in general, but especially to women's hearts, the longing for relationship, you have to have sex in order to get that. You have to be
Yeah.
sexual in order to get that. You like if you want that, you have to take this path to get it because men don't know how to give it to you any other way. Um and that yeah, I mean it's horrifying, but you can see how that ingrains itself into our psyches. And I know many holy, beautiful marriages where that's something that you have to kind of work out of is like, okay, no, you need to learn how to be emotionally connected and emotionally in sync with or without sexuality in your life. Because, I
Yeah.
mean, abstinence is a thing that needs to happen or just different things happen. Go, Maeve. Um, so I think, yeah, I think we have to separate emotional connection from sex, not entirely because they should be connected. We should recognize the
Sure.
the beauty of the emotional connection that can come from sexuality in safe places. But yeah, I think that's just a lie that a lot of women, I think every single one of us who is alive today, like we have to confront that lie that in order to get the good, beautiful connection that we actually long for, we have to behave sexually in order to get it. And yeah, and I think the place that we start over is in prayer, is with the Lord. And we can come to him with our damaged imagination. We can come to him with those attachments that we have that we no longer want to have, and start there. Like start, letting him clear out, what shouldn't be there. I'm constantly turning back to Jesus clearing the temple. That's one of my favorite gospel passages. And just being
Uh-huh.
reminded, like, my heart's the temple. I've let the money changers in. They're selling pigeons over there in that corner and they should not be. Like I've got attachments that I shouldn't have. I have damage that I shouldn't have. And he comes in and he turns those tables over and he casts them out. So even just, yeah, starting with those lies that you have to confront of like, why don't you think you're made for intimacy? Or what do you think you have to give or do or be to get this? Why do you think you have to earn it? I think confronting that.
Yeah. And even just that intimacy in itself, because it's such a good, like recognizing that the fact that you're having such deep longings, like is actually one of the greatest gifts that we can have. And it's
Yes.
almost as natural to us. I'll say as food. Okay, so I have my master's in nutrition. Okay, and
Mm-hmm.
something that I talk about a lot. I feel like when I'm talking about theology too, is in the natural. The number one reason that we choose the food that we eat is not price, not health, not culture, but taste. It's
Mm,
things that we taste. It's that in a natural, you can know something is the healthiest thing for you, that's the cheapest, blah, 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 all the things down the line. If you don't like the taste, you're not going to eat it. And
right.
recognize that in the same sense of like these emotional tastes or longings that we have, how often does Jesus or the Gospels or anywhere in Scripture talks about like our hungers, our thirsts,
Mm,
that have in a spiritual sense. It's that natural to us, as natural as we need food in the day just to eat, that we have natural hungers, we have spiritual hungers. One of my favorite definitions of prayer, I have this written down in this long, I just like, I don't know where you keep notes in your life. I just have like a long, like every note that I ever want to remember. Is it the best organized note? It's just there. But one of my favorite of prayer is St. Augustine says that prayer is the encounter of God's thirst with ours. That God
mm,
is thirsting for us, that we are thirsting for Him. Sometimes it looks like we're thirsting for other things, but we're for the ultimate good of Him.
right.
See, Maeve right now is thirsting, you can tell, for attention on this podcast.
Yeah. This
Like
is.
prayer in itself is this encounter of these thirsts meeting each other. Then the same way we
Mm,
have natural thirst when you run a marathon and you're thirsty, in a similar sense of like huge long day at work and I'm spiritually so thirsty, and my ultimate longing of what I'm thirsting for is the Lord. And so recognizing that these hungers, these thirsts for intimacy, are as natural hungers, and in
mm,
this that like we do need to fill with food. Our question is, what are we filling with,
mm,
and how does the Lord actually want to be the fulfillment of all of those things?
mm. I love that. I think when you're talking about recognizing thirst, and Augustine is actually the perfect reference for this, but um I think women in sexual addiction, I want to say, in an odd way, have a unique privilege, of recognizing their thirst in such a blatant and, yeah, and really, terrifying fashion. But I've seen it time and time again. I think, and you would agree, at this point we've encountered so many women's stories and accompanied so many women in healing that uh, the enemy does not attack the apathetic with lust. He does not attack
Mm-hmm.
the lazy with lust. He does not go for the women with no passion. He does not go for the heartless. He goes for the passionate women, the zealous women, the gentle women. He goes for women whose hearts are alive and well. And he sees the plan of God for their life playing out. And he does not want them to be alive and well.
Yeah.
So I think women, especially in our community, I've just seen so many incredible hearts, and just kind of recognizing that what you're looking for in all of these other places, that's your longing coming out. Jay Stringer's Unwanted is literally about this. Your compulsion is a roadmap for your healing. But just that, yeah, you have the privilege of seeing your longing like so blatantly in front of you. That doesn't make your sins not sinful. It just it shows you what the origin is. It's woundedness and longing. It's a longing for fulfillment ultimately. But you have material that you can work with, very raw, very very distressing material, but material nonetheless that you can take to the Lord. And so in that unique way, it is a privilege. Hopefully not one that you stand for very long, but one that you have nonetheless. I think too, so much of it is not being worried about dissecting or longing or, like what's going on. It's like just letting him pursue you. Again, that's the most
Yeah.
uncomfortable thing. But I talked in our last episode about knocking from door to door, like where can I find Jesus? And then he's within you the whole time. And I think for me, as a woman with a more bold personality, and I very naturally have taken positions of leadership in the past, hold one now, like leadership is very comfortable for me. Control, unfortunately, is a flaw that comes out of that. I very easily take control of something. That in prayer, being before the Lord, I have to let that go. I have to stop saying, I'm going to be the leader. I'm going to take control. I'm going to plan this. Like there's so many different things that can come with just the way my temperament and personality work. But I just have to sit and I just have to receive. And usually the obstacle isn't that Jesus isn't giving me enough. It's that I'm not receiving enough. I'm the obstacle. And that's a tough truth to confront. Because often we just beg God. We're like, give me more grace, give me more faith, give me this intimacy that I long for. And it's like, well, actually, you're the one preventing yourself. Like, you're just not sitting and receiving. You're asking and asking and asking, but you won't receive. And he says, ask and ye shall receive. Like, you have to follow up with
Yeah.
that back end reception. He's constantly giving. He gives in abundance, and maybe not in the way that you think, but he just wants you to receive him. He wants to be seen by you too and be received by you.
I think something that you were just sharing about his pursuit of us, I made this connection, gosh, a few months ago. Like in the natural, that when I'm conversing with people, I'm just someone who's very inquisitive. I'm always the like, oh, how are you? This thing happened. Tell me more. Why do you think that happened? Who is there? Like, I'm just naturally like, I love details of stories and I love knowing people's hearts. So I think in the natural, I'm always asking questions to people. And I found, I had to like laugh at myself that in the natural, I love, like, if I'm catching up with a friend I haven't seen in weeks, I'll have my, like, I'll say set of questions that I want to ask them about. And I'll like keep interrupting them to be like, oh, but how's the softball thing? Great. Yeah. Yeah. Are you still dating that guy? Yeah. Okay. And I just like continue to ask over without even like listening to their answer. And the Lord brought it up in prayer a few months ago, to be like, that's how you talk to me a lot of the time. And I was like, shoot, dang, I also just shoot dang that's how I'm talking to other people, and let alone that's how I talk to the Lord, is that I'm very good at being like, okay, Lord, I know I need to ask you for this, and I know this has been going on, so can you please help me with this? Also, this has been going on, so can you please help me with all of these things? And then by that point, I'm walking away from prayer, and at no point do I have the chance to receive from the Lord the graces that he actually wants to give me. And so I think, just like you said, that ask and receive, there's a two-part balance. And that one, I think we have a church that sometimes is too afraid to ask. The Lord can move in serious, miraculous ways when we ask him to. And in the name of Jesus, the name of Jesus is so powerful. And in response to that, we can ask and ask and ask. If your heart is not open to receive, like out of great love, like that's a you thing. Like, that's not the Lord. The Lord is like so generous that he has every good gift for you. But if your arms are crossed and you're looking the other way and you have headphones in, like, you're not going to be able to receive the gift that he has. And so being able to sit back and say like, okay, Lord, I'm actually going to say these things out loud. Like, actually, I really do want this to happen. Lord, I actually do want freedom. And he wants to hear that from you. He wants you to ask him for that. At the same time, it's like, gosh, am I going to be able to receive what he's giving me? And do I actually trust that he does have those good things for me and that he wants to give them to me? I think a lot in my life. I mean, this could be 8 episodes about like just trusting the Lord, but like what's preventing me from being receptive? Sometimes I'll make the prayer and ask, but I don't think he can actually come through. So I'm not even in a place ready to receive, because I'm like, I'm supposed to say this thing, but he's not actually going to give it to me. Instead of like, no, the Lord said if you have faith as small as a mustard seed, he can move a full mountain in you. So I think he can do this. This is the God who created everything. Like he can deal with the innermost workings of my own heart. And so actually being like, okay, Lord, I don't get it, but I do trust that you can do something with this. So I'm going to be receptive to it. And so like actually opening up your heart.
Yeah, absolutely. I I remember like a pivotal season of healing for me with my sexuality. And um, there was finally a time in adoration where I just heard very clearly from the Lord when I was like, I feel like this is just eternally broken, Jesus. Like I feel like this will never be a force for good in my life, a force for unity with you in my life. I feel like this will always hold me back from you. Just my sexuality in general. As long as we're holding back, one of the priests I know described them as islands, you know, as long as we're keeping something on reserve, we have an island that we're holding away from the Lord. Like, of course, we're never going to experience intimacy there. And usually it's the places that we want to experience it the most that we hold back from Him. And I think in sexual addiction as a woman, it is so easy to just say, like, I am just going to shove my sexuality in a box and I'm going to just pretend that I don't have longing there. And I'm just going to be caught up in how difficult it is, to experience intimacy there. And I'm going to believe the lie that it's just impossible for me. Maybe for other people, they can experience this beauty here, whether single, married, in religious life, wherever you are. But it's not for me, and I think I gave into that lie for a long time of just like, I long for this deep communion with the Lord and in my soul more than anything, but that expresses itself through my body. And I need to get rid of that somehow, or just that the bodiliness will always feel at war with the desires of my soul. And that's just so not true. And it doesn't mean that it becomes perfect, but yeah, I've just really seen the Lord in the past 4 or 5 years just really speak to my bodiliness and my sexuality and just the longing that's there. And just how it is a reflection of what's going on in my soul. And it's a way to open my heart to Him, is going like, I'm experiencing this in my bodiliness, in my humanity. And
Yes.
it's a sign of what's going on in my soul. Like, I just long for unity, like you're pointing out. Like, I just want to be with you. And sometimes that kind of comes out as, I want to be with this person, and okay, just welcoming that, and because the Lord does. And I think I needed to learn that there's no sin so great that you can't get down to that kernel of like longing and expression that you're looking for and take it to Him. Like, He knows what you've done. But if you go to Him and you're like, at the bottom of all of this, there's this, please help me find a new way. Help me find a new way to seek intimacy with you, because I am just running, to these desert wastelands and looking there instead. Please bring me back home. Because it's in there, There's a lot of debate in the theological world about whether or not you can seek evil for its own sake. That's like one of the fun little things that you get to do. Like, if you're studying theology, it's just like, do you stay in the Augustine camp of, you can seek evil for its own sake, or do you go into the other theological camps? And I think working in Magdala, I don't know if I agree with my boy Augustine, which is funny because I actually studied Augustine heavily in grad school and did my master's thesis on some elements of his epistemology. But like, I don't know if I agree with my boy there, that you can seek evil for its own sake, because there's just so much longing beneath everything, that we do. Even the most sinful things that we do, there's a longing for something good there. And even if it's just a shred, I don't know. But yeah.
100%. And that I mean, we know more about who we are because we know who He is, and we know that His heart for us is always restoration and redemption. And so places of brokenness and longing, His deepest desire is to bring redemption there and restoration, specifically to all sort of sexual and romantic longings, because all throughout Scripture, it's God's love letter to us. It starts with the first union of man and woman. In the very center is the Song of Songs, all about the beautiful sexual act of man and woman coming together, which is God coming together with His church, and it ends in Revelation with the marriage. Behold, the bridegroom is here. That these are the places of our hearts that the Lord doesn't want us to shy away from, because He's never shied away from it, because in fact, that's always been His heart for us. Specifically in areas of sexuality and romantic love. I mean, this is all TOB of marital love that the Lord like has for us, but recognizing that like the Lord has never shied away from that part of our heart by any means. He's always used it to speak to us through. And so recognizing that when that's his heart for us, that eros for us, that longing for us, that desperate desire, then we know, oh, that's actually a part of God's heart that's being expressed in me. So that's good. And that gets disordered. I'm not saying all sexual activity is good by any means, but I am saying that when you're experiencing that, that's a part of the Lord's heart that you're experiencing that's in you. That's always what it's been throughout all of scripture and history and tradition. And it's what it continues to be. And so it's like you're actually expressing the love of the Lord when you're experiencing this deep eros and this deep longing.
That's such a good point. And Benedict XVI in Deus Caritas Est, actually, like, he built a whole encyclical from that, you know, of just like, there's this age-old romance that we have with God. God is love, you know, and eros, he says, is ascending love, like it goes up towards God, and agape is descending love. It's God's love coming down towards us. It's this outpouring. So eros just reaches up. It wants something. It wants to be taken above itself. It wants to be taken outside of itself. And lust is selfish. Lust turns you inward, but eros sends you upward, and it's so good. And so women in sexual addiction, like, you are experiencing a distortion of eros, and eros in prayer is very powerful. So attack the distortion. Don't attack the eros. Just go for the distortion, please, because eros is amazing. Should keep it around. But yeah, I reread the encyclical recently, and was just so inspired by Benedict's ability to talk about the relationship between agape and eros, but just how necessary eros is in the life of the church. And yeah, how it is that reaching up, that longing, that desiring for, you know, to be taken outside of yourself, to be loved, to be embraced, and yeah, just how good that is. But you're reaching up for something. I love that image. You want to be united to something outside of you. And when you have that image of what eros is, lust is revealed for the counterfeit that it is. You know, you're not going to equate the two so much anymore. Like C.S. Lewis says in The Great Divorce, lust is a poor, weak, whimpering, whispering thing when replaced with the richness and energy that desire can bring when lust is killed. You know, and I'm not going to get that quote exactly right, but that's the essence of it. Is desire is so good, it is so beautiful, but
Yes.
Yeah, and you will encounter that when it replaces lust. But like, do not attack desire, attack lust. I just think that's so crucial, and especially in prayer. I think I've talked to several women, specifically when I do college events. There's this common problem of their imagination has been so hijacked by pornography and by sexual fantasy that they sexually fantasize about the Lord, and they're so afraid to approach mental prayer because they are so afraid of offending the Lord because of these fantasies. First of all, the Lord is not offended by you. Second of all, don't shy away from your imagination just because it's been hijacked in this way. It's been attacked. And that breaks my heart, that fear, you know, because you have invasive thoughts that are not your own, that you've been conditioned to think because of the content you're taking in and the behaviors you're engaging in. But please don't run from the Lord in your imagination. Sit there with him, working over and over and over against these invasive thoughts and images. He wants to sit there and he wants to heal you. He wants to work through those images with you. Find what is at the bottom of that longing in those images. Find what's at the bottom of these behaviors. But don't run away from him because you're afraid of offending him. With your mess, you're not going to offend him. And yeah, and I wouldn't be speaking to such an awkward thing, I guess, if it weren't that I've just encountered that as a very regular problem for women. But especially because the Lord is a man, when you've been conditioned to think a certain way about men, in particular in pornography, women too, but when you've been conditioned to sexually fantasize about men, it's easy for that to translate to the Lord. But don't run from him. Like, he's the only one who can really heal you of that, whether by psychological or spiritual means. So I just think that's super important as we're talking about longing and taking it to him. I think a lot of women have a fear of that for that reason.
My My heart is so moved in hearing that, and I can only imagine it's a reflection of the Lord's heart of like him saying like, do you not think that I would love to redeem that for you? Like if
Mm,
so jealous for us, wants to show us the purest of love.
mm,
But like that's his heart. Like, do you not think he is so moved by you in that state that he would do anything to say, like daughter, like let me sit with you and like show you what true love is because you have a distorted view of it. And I want to show you pure
mm.
love. And so just the recognition of like the Lord's heart for us so desperately. Wants to redeem these places for us, and yeah, just what you said, that he's not offended, he's not ashamed by us, he's not, I just think of like, again, in the natural, if you were to I'll say meet a righteous and holy man and he learns of your sexual past, that a righteous and holy man who's meant to be with you is not going to be afraid of you, is not going to condemn you, but he's going to say, wow, like, I can't wait. Like, he's going to be encouraged because men love a challenge, and men are going to be like, I can't wait to show you what true, real, pure love is that you haven't experienced. So, how much more is the Lord's heart that, like, for you, you know?
Yeah, I know. I do know. Yeah, I have a husband who's been beautifully redemptive in that way too, but Jesus more than him, you know.
Sure.
And the Lord was working on this part of my story.
That was
Yeah, so the real guest is Maeve, apparently. It's featuring Annie and Maeve. Um, yeah, I think uh, that's where I don't know. I feel like we've hit it. But maybe in a practical sense, how do you begin doing this in prayer? When we set up our kind of beginner practical episode for the first episode of this little prayer series, but in this one, I think one of the most important moments to do it is in temptation. Kind of like you pointed out earlier with like your own thoughts of just like, Lord, I'm experiencing this, what's going on, and just kind of dissecting it. I think going to the longing and being present to it in a moment of temptation is perhaps one of the best things you can do. Is just there was a lot of healing that came into my life when I finally, like, when I would be tempted towards some sort of sexual compulsion, particularly pornography. Is like, oh gosh, Jesus, I'm feeling so stressed and I'm looking for support. I'm just longing for support and unity and like just the feeling that something has or someone has my back and has my good in mind. That's actually what I'm looking for right now, and I'm going to take that to you. Or just whatever emotion I was experiencing at the time. That's why it's really important for women and men, but women in particular, to identify their emotional and circumstantial triggers, is because they will tell you what you're looking for. And so just practically speaking, look for the longing in the moments of temptation. What are you actually looking for? And then try to find it in prayer with the Lord instead. Okay, she's back. But yeah, that's a practical note that I think I'd love to end on from my end. But yeah, any thoughts on how to practically take longing into prayer?
I think the few things that come to mind are just places that the Lord has used to bring healing in my own life. And so one of those being, I wrote a blog post on John 8. I will never stop talking about John 8
John
because of
8
the
is
amount of
it. Yeah.
um, uh, amount of healing it's brought. Particularly talking about the longing and then pursuit of the Lord. The Lord has spoken to me extensively through Hosea 2. Of if you don't know the story of Hosea, I think Hosea is just healing in general. But Hosea 2, starting at about I think verse 14, it's saying that he will then take Israel back, who was the unfaithful wife, who Hosea was marrying, but take her back. I will speak tenderly to her in the desert. She will no longer call me my master, but my husband. I will remove the name of other Baals from her lips. So, like other past gods, like other lovers, like the Lord is removing other lovers from your lips. That's something I've prayed with extensively. And then a third place, it's just Revelation 21. So Revelation coming of the New Jerusalem. where all tears will be wiped, sorrow will be gone, and where the bride is beautifully dressed for her husband. Like allow the Lord to speak with this imagery that's been so distorted, but allow him to use it in a purifying way to show you as the beautiful bride who's not too impure and broken for him, but just beautiful and dressed before him. Also, tiny note, the song is called Only One by Harvest. That is so healing. And all the song is I will remove the name of past lovers. It's just literally just like singing Hosea 2. If you don't know that song, look it up. It's called Only One by Harvest. Please listen to that. That's also just healing. So those are just random places I found healing, but I think those are beautiful places to start praying with. Because at the end of the day, prayer, you just have to do it. And so what we've said this whole time is, if this is just content that you're listening to, but you're not actually digesting and using, out of great love, like, that's on you, because the Lord actually wants to bring you healing there. And so, like, allow him to speak in these new areas, allow him to speak to some of the things that we said, and redeem our words in the ways that they weren't perfectly his, and allow him to heal you there. So those are just beautiful places, I think, to pray with to start. Rachel, have you heard that song? It's called Only One by Harvest.
I haven't. I'm going to go look it up. My random healing song is Open Your Eyes by Snow Patrol. No idea how it came to my life. Oh, wait, no, I do remember. But yeah, it just, that's my song. That song for recovery for me was just so powerful. So that's a fun one. Yeah, I love it. My daughter is melting down, so we must conclude. But as always, friends, if you would like more content, please join us on Patreon. We do book studies and other fun stuff. I can't remember what I usually say during this time, but because she's crying. But if you would like to join us on Patreon, we're doing book studies and other stuff. Right now, we're doing a book study on J. Stringer's Unwanted, which I kind of referenced in this episode, and it's a beautiful book on longing, ultimately, and how our brokenness can lead us to deeper encounters with the Lord. And as always, if you are a woman in need of recovery and healing from sexual addictions, please visit the link below to inquire about joining a group. We slowed down on registration. So come to us, women. If you have been holding back, you've been listening to this podcast and going, I'm just going to listen to the podcast, I'm not going to join a group. This is your sign. Join a group, or at least inquire about it, because we want to have you as part of our community. And if you're a woman who has healed from a sexual addiction or compulsion, or just, sexually broken experiences, please join us as a moderator. So you can inquire at the same link in the show notes about leading women towards healing. So we're developing a wonderful community over there of women who are joining us in the fight, and we would love to have you join us as well. If you are in need of Covenant Eyes, use the code Magdala for 30 free days. Definitely worth a shot, y'all. Covenant Eyes is an accountability software, so you get a buddy to come alongside you and you fight this together. But if you need a code, use the word Magdala, all caps, and get 30 days free. But other than that, thanks again for joining us, all our lovely listeners. You're in our prayers, and we will catch you soon. God bless. Thanks for joining the conversation today on the Magdala podcast. If you want to learn more, join a support group with other women on the journey, or find more content, visit magdalaministries.org. If you want to continue to be a part of the conversation, like, subscribe, and share this podcast. But most importantly, wherever you are in the journey of healing, know that you're not alone and you don't have to hide anymore. We're excited to welcome you to the table next time. God bless.